What if humanity's knowledge came at a divine cost? Picture this: a celestial being, once radiant and revered among the hosts of heaven, descending to earth not in ruin, but in purpose. A purpose that would change the course of human destiny forever. He didn't come to destroy, he came to teach. And what he taught was never meant for mortal minds. His name was Azazel, a name whispered through ancient texts, feared by priests, revered by occultists, and forever entangled with the concept of forbidden wisdom. This video will take you deep into the real story of Azazel, far beyond the common demonized image or simplistic interpretations found in pop culture. We're going to uncover his origins in ancient scripture, track his role in one of the most mysterious celestial rebellions, and dissect the very knowledge he passed on to humanity. Knowledge so dangerous it was deemed worthy of eternal punishment. But this isn't just a story of damnation. It's also a philosophical exploration of what it means to seek truth and the cost that pursuit can carry. You'll learn how Azazel's teachings, ranging from the arts of war to the secrets of beauty and sorcery, planted the seeds of civilization and destruction alike. We'll explore how his legacy became a central part of ancient atonement rituals, where his name echoed in the wilderness as sins were cast away. But more than that, we'll see how occult traditions have kept Azazel's fire burning through the centuries, reframing him not as a villain, but as a bearer of light in the shadows. We'll also look at the wider cultural and symbolic echoes of his myth. Azazel is more than a fallen angel. He is an archetype, a symbol of the Promethean figure who risks all to bring wisdom to those kept in the dark. And we'll ask by the end whether Azazel is a true corrupter of humankind or a misunderstood guide toward dangerous divine knowledge. This is not the sanitized version taught in mainstream religion, nor the caricature of evil found in horror films. This is the real story of Azazel. To truly understand Azazel's significance, we have to go back, far back, into the earliest layers of religious literature, where language, ritual, and myth all blur together. The name Azazel itself is cryptic, and scholars have debated its meaning for centuries. In Hebrew, it's often interpreted in several ways. Some believe it comes from Azaz, meaning rugged or strong, and El, the word for God, making Azazel the strength of God. Others argue it has roots in ancient desert demon lore, implying a being cast out or dwelling in wilderness. But perhaps the most famous interpretation is tied to the concept of the scapegoat, the being upon whom sins are symbolically placed and driven into exile. And that idea comes straight from one of the oldest books in the Bible. Azazel makes one of his earliest canonical appearances in the Book of Leviticus, chapter 16. It's here we find the ancient Yom Kippur ritual, the Day of Atonement, when the high priest of Israel would take 2 goats, one for the Lord and one for Azazel. The first would be sacrificed, the second would be kept alive, and the priest would symbolically place all the sins of the people upon its head before sending it out into the wilderness for Azazel. This strange and haunting ceremony sparked centuries of debate. Was Azazel simply a desolate place? Was it a metaphor for banishment? Or was it a conscious, spiritual entity, one who received the sins of mankind? If Azazel were only mentioned in Leviticus, maybe he'd remain just that, an ambiguous footnote in religious tradition. But he doesn't stay confined to the Torah. His story expands dramatically in the ancient Jewish texts that never made it into the standard biblical canon, particularly the Book of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls. These writings, buried in the desert for millennia and only rediscovered in the 20th century, cast Azazel not as a passive receiver of sin, but as an active corrupter of humanity. According to these texts, Azazel was one of the Watchers, a group of angels sent to watch over humanity, who ultimately betrayed their divine mission. This is where Azazel's role shifts from mysterious wilderness spirit to cosmic rebel. He becomes more than a name invoked during ritual. He becomes a personality, a force, and most of all, a teacher. He doesn't tempt humanity in secret. He steps forward and gives them something that heaven had forbidden them to have. Importantly, we must separate Azazel from figures like Satan or Lucifer, who have become more central in Christian demonology. Azazel is not the tempter in Eden, nor the accuser in the divine court. He is not the great dragon of Revelation or the serpent beneath the tree of knowledge. Instead, he is a separate entity with his own mythological arc. While Lucifer is often portrayed as a fallen morning star cast out due to pride, Azazel's fall is tied directly to his actions, specifically what he gave to humans and the consequences that followed. This distinction is crucial because it paints Azazel not simply as a rebel, but as an origin point for humanity's first encounter with advanced knowledge. His fall isn't just about disobedience. It's about a deliberate choice to arm the human race with tools of creation and ultimately destruction. The roots of his story are tangled in rituals, desert myths, and apocalyptic literature, and yet all point to the same truth. Azazel was the one who broke the divine silence, the one who shattered the boundary between celestial wisdom and earthly ignorance, and that act would echo across every spiritual tradition that followed. Azazel's story reaches its most vivid and dangerous chapter within the Book of Enoch, a non-canonical but profoundly influential text that expands the mythos of fallen angels and cosmic rebellion. This is where Azazel becomes more than a name whispered in desert rituals. This is where he takes form, speaks, leads, and corrupts. The Watchers, or Grigori, were a group of 200 angels tasked with observing humanity from afar. They were not meant to interfere, only to watch, but they did not obey. These celestial beings looked down upon the daughters of men and desired them, not as caretakers or guides, but as lovers. Azazel is often portrayed as a prominent figure among these watchers, possibly their leader, or at the very least their most dangerous member. Alongside Semyasa, who some traditions identify as the ringleader, Azazel descended to earth. The place of their descent, Mount Hermon, was not just symbolic, it became the site of a pact. There the Watchers swore an oath to each other that they would all go through with their transgression, ensuring none could later betray the others to avoid punishment. This oath is central to the myth. It marks a moment of unity and defiance, a cosmic crime committed with full awareness of the consequences. They did not fall in ignorance, they fell in conviction. Azazel's role in this rebellion is especially damning, not because he took human wives, but because of what he did next. While the other Watchers taught various arcane secrets to humanity, it was Azazel who shared the most influential and dangerous knowledge. Unlike Lucifer, whose rebellion was driven by pride and ambition, Azazel's rebellion was educational. He was not merely acting against divine law, he was reshaping the very structure of human civilization. Once among the divine, now bound to the earth, he took it upon himself to become a teacher of forbidden truths. The significance of this defiance isn't just about heavenly betrayal, it's about the violation of sacred boundaries between heaven and earth, between divine beings and mortal flesh, between what should be known and what must remain hidden. When Azazel and the Watchers crossed those lines, they triggered a spiritual catastrophe. Humanity, once fragile and ignorant, was now armed with celestial secrets, and these secrets, once known, could not be unlearned. This is where the myth of Azazel becomes more than a cautionary tale. It becomes a paradigm. He is the one who takes action, the one who imposes knowledge upon the world. Whether you see that as a gift or a curse depends entirely on how you interpret his legacy. Was he a liberator, freeing humanity from divine control? Or was he a corrupter, setting us on a path of destruction we could never escape? The Watchers would soon face the wrath of heaven, but Azazel's role among them stands out because of what he chose to share, and how deeply it would alter the human story. Through Azazel, the myth moves from rebellion to revolution, from obedience to awakening. But the price for this awakening was already beginning to take shape. Azazel's most damning act, the act that ensured his downfall and marked him as a cosmic criminal, was not lust nor rebellion alone. It was knowledge. Specifically, the deliberate gift of forbidden knowledge to humanity. In the Book of Enoch, this wasn't vague or metaphorical. The knowledge Azazel shared had form, it had function, it had devastating power. He taught men the art of war. Azazel revealed how to forge swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. Until then, human beings were defenseless creatures, living off the land, bound to nature's pace. But with metal tools and weapons, everything changed. With fire and ore, men no longer simply survived, They conquered. They hunted not just for food, but for domination. They began to kill with precision and intent. And so, with iron in their hands, they learned the darker dimensions of power. But Azazel didn't stop there. His influence spread to the realm of appearance, desire, and deception. He taught women the art of beautifying the eyelids, the use of precious stones, and the crafting of bracelets and ornaments. This was more than superficial vanity. In ancient contexts, cosmetics and adornments held magical and symbolic power. To beautify oneself was not only to become attractive, it was to channel desire, manipulate perception, and alter social power structures. Azazel had handed humanity the tools of seduction and persuasion, weapons of a different kind. Beyond the physical, he also opened the door to sorcery. Azazel and the Watchers taught enchantments, root cutting, astrology, the mechanics of the heavens and the secrets buried in the earth. These weren't the natural sciences of later ages. These were magical systems that offered influence over nature, time, and fate. Knowledge once preserved for celestial beings alone was now spread across mortal minds. The forbidden nature of this knowledge didn't lie solely in its content, but in its consequences. It disrupted the balance between divine and human, between what was meant to be known and what was not. The Watchers, Azazel especially, intervened in the divine order, and the result was catastrophic. The human world began to unravel. Violence spread, lust ruled, and chaos overtook the harmony that once existed. There's a haunting line in 1 Enoch that sums it up. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. The knowledge given by Azazel had empowered humanity, but at the cost of its innocence. It's a pattern we recognize. With every leap in knowledge comes a shadow. Fire warms, but it burns. Steel protects, but it kills. Beauty inspires, but it manipulates. Knowledge is not neutral, and Azazel didn't give it gently. He unleashed it like a flood. But why did he do it? That question haunts the myth. Was it compassion? Did he see humans as helpless and deserving of divine wisdom? Or was it contempt, a way to defile the Creator's design by accelerating human corruption? The sources don't offer a clear answer. That ambiguity is part of what makes the story so potent. Azazel isn't just a villain, he's a mystery. He's the embodiment of a question that every society must face. Should all knowledge be pursued, no matter the cost? In the mythic imagination, Azazel becomes the origin of every human ambition that stretches too far. He is not the father of evil. He is the father of potential, dangerous, beautiful, and irreversible. And from that moment forward, humanity would never be the same. The heavens did not remain silent. According to the Book of Enoch, when the angels looked down upon earth and saw what Azazel and the other Watchers had done, they were horrified. The natural order was unraveling. Blood soaked the ground. The cries of the oppressed, the slain, and the deceived rose up and reached the very throne of God. What had once been a quiet world of innocence had become a battlefield of knowledge, lust, and violence. And at the center of it all stood Azazel, the great corrupter. God's response was swift, but not immediate. First came judgment. The archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, were sent forth not to reason or negotiate, but to carry out divine justice. Each was given a specific command, and Raphael was assigned the task of dealing with Azazel. The punishment he delivered was not just exile, it was erasure. Azazel was to be bound hand and foot, cast into the scorched wilderness of Dudael, a place described as a desolate, jagged wasteland filled with burning rocks and eternal darkness. There Azazel would be buried in the desert, under sharp stones in utter isolation. A pit was dug into the earth as his prison, and over it, the archangels placed a covering of rough, burning terrain. This wasn't death. This was a living sentence. Azazel would remain there imprisoned until the day of judgment. But his punishment wasn't only physical, it was spiritual and symbolic. The Book of Enoch says that the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. That phrase is key. To him ascribe all sin. In this statement, Azazel becomes more than a figure. He becomes a scapegoat, the ultimate vessel of blame, carrying the weight of humanity's fall from grace. And it is here that we return to the ritual in Leviticus. The Yom Kippur scapegoat, the goat for Azazel, is no longer just a purification act. It is a reenactment of Azazel's punishment, a symbolic casting away of sin, banishing it into the wilderness, just as the angel himself was banished into the wastelands of Dudael. Every year, this ritual reaffirms Azazel's role in humanity's spiritual history. He becomes not just the corrupter, but the sin-bearer. And that association runs deep across cultures that inherited or were influenced by these ancient myths. Compared to other fallen angels, Azazel's punishment is more personal, more direct. The rest of the Watchers were also bound and imprisoned, but it is Azazel who is singled out as the worst among them. His actions went beyond personal lust or defiance. He taught, and in doing so, he changed the fate of the entire human race. The knowledge he shared could not be taken back, so his body had to be taken away. Still, one question lingers. If Azazel truly corrupted mankind beyond repair, why wasn't the earth simply destroyed? In Enoch's vision, the answer is chilling. God sends the great flood. The Nephilim, the monstrous hybrid offspring of the Watchers and human women, are wiped out. Humanity is given a reset, but Azazel's knowledge doesn't disappear. It survives in whispers, in stone, in ritual, and in the secret arts passed down through generations. And Azazel remains, buried beneath the earth, not dead, not forgotten, waiting. In mythic terms, Azazel's punishment is not only a divine reaction, but a warning. It shows the boundary between sacred wisdom and profane power. When that boundary is crossed, the consequences are cosmic. Yet even bound in chains, Azazel's influence echoes. His legacy cannot be buried as easily as his body. Despite his divine imprisonment, Azazel was never truly silenced. His name may have been stripped from the mainstream religious canon, buried in deserts and cast into the margins, but in the shadows among occult circles, mystical sects, and esoteric texts, his presence endured. Not as a mere cautionary tale, but as a figure of power, rebellion, and secret wisdom. In occult traditions, Azazel undergoes a transformation. No longer just the chained corrupter of the Book of Enoch, he becomes something else entirely, a symbol of illumination, of the dangerous beauty of knowledge. Some interpret him as a kind of Promethean archetype, one who dares to steal fire from the gods and gift it to humankind. In this version, his sin isn't wickedness, it's defiance. His punishment is not justice, but tyranny. Through this lens, Azazel becomes a liberator, and his teachings are seen not as curses, but as keys to human evolution. Various grimoires and demonological texts reflect this shift. In the Lemegeton, also known as the Lesser Key of Solomon, Azazel is either listed directly or syncretized with other spirits of knowledge and rebellion. Though not always by name, the essence of Azazel, fallen, fiery, wise, and dangerous, reappears again and again in the occult framework. In some interpretations, he is associated with the goat-headed demon Baphomet, or with spirits of war and artifice. These connections are not always consistent, but the recurring idea remains. Azazel is a source of forbidden mastery. Occultists throughout history have often reimagined fallen angels not as villains, but as victims of divine oppression. Beings who chose knowledge, freedom, and individuality over obedience. Within that tradition, Azazel's story becomes empowering. He taught humans how to shape the world. He helped them move from weakness to strength, from submission to creativity. What theologians condemned as corruption, mystics reinterpreted as transformation. In some left-hand path traditions, Azazel is openly invoked as a guide, not in worship but in communion. His chains are seen as symbols not of guilt, but of suppression, of how systems of power silence those who question, those who offer alternate truths. To call on Azazel is to align with the archetype of the forbidden teacher, to accept that truth is not always pure, and that wisdom often comes at the price of exile. There are also connections made between Azazel and the archetype of the adversary, not necessarily Satan, but the spiritual force that challenges, tests, and catalyzes growth. In some branches of Thelema, Luciferianism, and modern ceremonial magic, Azazel is viewed as a dark mentor figure, offering knowledge without moral restraint. He doesn't tell the practitioner what is good or evil. He offers the tools, and the consequences belong to the seeker. Even the image of the goat, often tied to Azazel due to the scapegoat ritual, has become a staple in occult symbolism. The goat is stubborn, proud, primal. It climbs heights others fear to tread. In that sense, the goat for Azazel becomes more than a sin bearer. It becomes an emblem of the outcast who walks his own path. This is where Azazel truly departs from orthodox theology and enters the living stream of esoteric philosophy. He is no longer just a fallen angel punished for defying heaven. He is the spark of dangerous curiosity, the whisper behind the veil, the one who gives without asking permission. Whether you see that as evil or liberating depends entirely on how you understand power and what you are willing to risk to obtain it. Azazel did not remain trapped solely within the pages of apocryphal texts or whispered in occult rituals. Over the centuries, his name and image seeped into the wider cultural imagination, reshaped, reinterpreted, and reimagined for new audiences and new eras. Today he exists not only as a theological or esoteric figure, but as a symbol embedded in literature, film, video games, and philosophical thought. And everywhere he appears, one theme endures: forbidden knowledge and the cost of seeking it. In literature, Azazel often appears as a shadowy character, sometimes demonic, sometimes tragic. He shows up in poems, plays, and novels, not always by name, but in spirit. The archetype he represents, the one who gives knowledge at a price, has become deeply rooted in Western storytelling. Characters like Mephistopheles in Faust, or even more modern mentors with a dark edge, reflect Azazel's legacy. They are not pure evil. They are catalysts. They push protagonists to ask questions they shouldn't, to learn truths they can't unlearn, and once that door is opened, it never closes. In cinema, Azazel has taken on many forms. He's been portrayed as a demon that transfers through touch, as in the 1998 film Fallen, or as an infernal power lurking behind the facade of the rational world. In fantasy and horror genres, he's often invoked to symbolize temptation, rebellion, or the lure of dangerous power. He's never just a monster. He's the one who offers, the one who reveals, the one who dares the hero to step over the line. But perhaps the most powerful echo of Azazel in modern thought is philosophical. He is a mythic anchor for a question humanity has never stopped asking: should there be limits to what we know? Azazel's story confronts us with the idea that wisdom may be a burden, that progress may come with spiritual weight. He is not unlike Prometheus, who gave fire to man and suffered for it. Not unlike the serpent in Eden, who pointed out the tree and said, "You shall not surely die." This recontextualization forces a re-examination of morality. Was Azazel truly evil, or merely disobedient to a divine order that sought to keep humanity in the dark? Was he a destroyer of innocence, or an advocate for autonomy? The myth refuses easy answers. It lingers in ambiguity, as all enduring archetypes do. In the end, Azazel's cultural legacy endures because he represents something universal. The moment when curiosity overcomes fear. The moment when someone chooses to know, even if that knowledge changes everything. Whether depicted as villain, hero, demon, or scapegoat, Azazel stands at the threshold between ignorance and power and dares us to cross it. Azazel is not a figure easily forgotten. His story refuses to fade into the background of ancient mythology. Whether as a fallen angel, a forbidden teacher, a scapegoat, or a symbol of dangerous enlightenment, Azazel continues to haunt the edges of human consciousness. His myth stretches across thousands of years, morphing with each culture, each interpretation, each new attempt to understand what it means to seek truth in a world governed by boundaries, moral, divine, and cosmic. At the heart of his legend is a contradiction. He is both corrupter and revealer, the one who defied heaven, yet gave humanity the tools to rise beyond its limits. He brought weapons and seduction, yes, but he also brought artifice, science, transformation. His legacy is soaked in blood and brilliance alike, and this duality is what makes him endure. Azazel's myth does not offer clean answers or moral certainty. Instead, it forces us to wrestle with ambiguity, to confront the uneasy idea that some gifts cannot be returned, and that knowledge once known cannot be forgotten. We still live under the shadow of his story. Every time a new technology changes the world, every time a new truth breaks through a system built on control or fear, the same old question returns. What is the price of knowledge? Are we meant to stay within the boundaries assigned to us? Or is our very nature defined by our refusal to accept limitation? Azazel's punishment, burial in the desert, bound beneath the earth, speaks to how threatening his gift was. The gods did not simply destroy him, they silenced him, isolated him, turned him into a living reminder of what happens when divine secrets are given to mortal minds. But even silence can speak. Even a bound angel leaves echoes. The question now is not just whether Azazel was evil or just. That debate will go on. The real question is what we do with the story, because Azazel's myth is not about the past, it is about the present, it is about now. Every time we choose to cross a line in pursuit of truth, every time we value understanding over obedience, insight over comfort, we walk the same path he once did. So ask yourself, are we still seeking forbidden truths today? Have we become the heirs to Azazel's legacy? And if so, who will judge us? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. How do you interpret Azazel's story? Is he a villain or a misunderstood hero? Do his teachings symbolize corruption or evolution? The story of Azazel isn't over. It's still being written. Every time a truth is uncovered, every time a question is asked that isn't supposed to be.